Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give people about 30 or 40 seconds to log on, and then we'll get started. So I'll get going now. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful, beautiful day. Welcome to today's Business Support Series webinar, and thank you for joining us. My name is Becky Davison. I'm the Vice President of Marketing here at the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, and I'm your host this morning. I've actually just completed my PMP on April 20th, which was a big day for me, and now I'm a certified project management professional, which is exciting. So thank you, Brenda, and thank you to your husband who got me through it. Thanks to the training, I learned a lot about Agile and Scrum management and how we can implement it into different organizations. I even have some things behind me here that I've learned about Agile and Scrum, so we'll learn about more of that today. And I'm looking forward, Brenda, to hearing from you and how this approach can benefit our members' businesses that are here with us today. Thank you for everyone who submitted questions for today's webinar. And if you have questions, please use the Q&A box down there. We'll monitor the chat, but if you put them in the Q&A, it's better for us to manage it. And our presenter today is Brenda Fay of BrenDaniel Productions Corp. Welcome, Brenda. It's great to see you, and thanks for joining us from San Francisco.
It's a great place to be. Well, thanks, Becky, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here today on this sunny, warm day, just like in my stated location here. So today we're going to talk about Agile and Scrum. We're going to look at some definitions, a bit of, educational portion, and then we'll look at how different organizations, how it has been beneficial for them. And then thirdly, I thought we'd look at, is it for me? Is Agile and Scrum, would that be something that I would be interested in and my organization? So Agile and Scrum. It'll be interesting for me to know who here actually uses Scrum. And if you want to share any of that information through, chat or Q&A, that'd be great. Agile and Scrum, we'll talk about them separately and together. And here we go. I thought we should pay tribute to the 17 fellows who came up with the term Agile officially, even though organizations have been doing work in an Agile manner for probably forever. This is not a new idea. However, the Agile Manifesto, where these fellows came together about 20 years ago and brought Agile into the software development world, officially, you could say, is new. 20 years is not a long time ago. So when these guys got together, they had a purpose. They were working in software development and they were saying, well, everything is not quite right here. Some things could be improved. The way that we're doing the work has some problems. So they got together in a resort for like 3 days and they said, we're not leaving here until we come up with some solutions. And that was the Agile Manifesto, which we'll look at in a minute. I worked in software development about that time and much before that as well. And I know what they were talking about is true. They were talking about traditional projects, and the problems were that there were many changes that were requested, and it was hard to keep up with the change. There was a lot of authority in projects. Typically a project manager was appointed, which is a great thing, Becky. And but the people doing the work probably didn't have enough say or authority in that. So those are some of the types of problems that they were thinking about at the time. And this is what they came out with, the Agile Manifesto. I know manifesto is kind of an unusual word for a newish way of working, but that's what they chose. So let's just look at the Agile Manifesto. This is the basis for working agilely. So when we think about working agilely, what do you think? What would be working agilely to you? Okay. When it's spoken of working agilely, usually people think we're adapting. We can change quickly. We can turn on a dime. We don't have long-term plans, but we can. And that we work better together. So when the 17 guys got together in the resort and they came up with the manifesto, they said, well, there are 4 values that are really important as a basis for how we want to work together. On the left on the screen, you see a value compared to something on the right. So they said, we value what's on the left and we value what's on the right, but we value what's on the left more. So for example, they said, we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. So the very first thing they recognized was that people were important and how people work together is important, right? We need processes and tools for the most part. We need to know how we're going to work together, and we need some tools. For example, Microsoft Project could be a tool, and those are very helpful for how we work together. However, the most important thing are the people and how they work together. If we're considering something, we would consider the individuals and the interactions first. The second value in Agile, according to the manifesto, is working software over comprehensive documentation. I worked in documentation for many years, creating user documents, systems manuals, online help, all that kind of thing. And I worked with software developers. I know documentation is important. However, if you don't have a working product, you don't have anything. Now, I should say at this time that although Agile and the manifesto came from the software industry, it applies and can apply to any industry. So manufacturing, even retail, healthcare, small business, big business, these principles and values, I should say, can apply to any type of business. And the important thing is to develop something to your customer that they can use. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Contracts are important. Generally, if we work with another company, if we have a vendor, a supplier, we'll have a contract. It might be very simple. It could be more complex. But the collaboration part of it was recognized as more important. So for example, in a project, the project might be a month, it might be 3 months, it might be a year, it might be many years. We can be sure that the customer will have changes, which relates to the next value, but also to this, and they will want input on what we're delivering. So Agile and Scrum, which we'll talk about shortly, builds in ways to collaborate, knowing that the collaboration is the most important part in this situation. And the fourth value of Agile is responding to change over following a plan. So if you worked in any length of project, it could even be a day, 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, to expect change. Even though it's good to have a plan, we generally have a plan, even if it's just in our mind. It's also good and very important to be able to deal with changes, right? So the items on the left are really the higher level of the value than the items on the right. So if you're thinking Is my organization agile? Could we be agile? Then you would consider, first of all, these values and think, do we do that? Does that apply to us? Are we interested in that? Can we work that into how we work? You don't actually need to use a methodology like Scrum, although it may be very helpful. The first step is thinking, does this suit us? So along with the values, there are 12 principles. Satisfying the customer, the very first principle. And you might recognize as we look at these things that people are very important in Agile, right? The customer is a person. That's what we want to do. If you've worked in manufacturing or other areas similar, you might know that some of these principles relate to lean development. You might have seen these before in other areas. When the fellows put together the manifesto, of course, they had a background of knowledge with them and they took, good points from different areas. Welcome changing requirements, delivering working software frequently, right? So this relates to our responding to change and customer collaboration. And you can insert whatever your working product would be there. And if you're using Scrum, which we'll look at the process in a minute, you'll see that delivering frequently, maybe it's every week, maybe it's once a month, we want to give something to the customer often so that they can have input. We can make sure we're on the right track and we can modify quickly. We're agile. Collaborate daily. On some projects, we can get the work, we can get our statement of work, we can go along our merry way. And then like a month later, say to the customer, what do you think of this? Without talking to them at all. In Agile, we wouldn't do that. We want to make sure we're collaborating quite often. Agile teams are based on motivated individuals, right? The team is important. The people are important. The ones who do the work are important, and anybody who has a role in Agile, of course, is important. Agile maintains face-to-face conversation is the best way to communicate. Now, I know these days we've got our virtual ways of working. You can see my face. And I, in many situations, I would see yours. So face-to-face can be done that way, but in person would be ideal too. I'll go through the other 6 now. So the measure of progress is through a working product. So this relates to delivering working software frequently. If we don't give our customers something that works, we have no progress, right? That's how we know we are progressing. And the customer knows we're progressing because they're getting something that works. Promote sustainable development. When you see sustainable, you might think land, the trees. In this case, it means it's sustainable to the people doing the work, the developers. We put in policies and we work in such a way so that we can maintain our pace of work. For example, overtime, not a good thing in Agile, because we should have a pace of work that we can work with regularly, daily, 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day, whatever it is. It's sustainable. It's something we can work with. Continuous attention to technical excellence. Well, is that going without saying? We all want technical excellence, but here we have continuous attention. It's not like every third day we'd make sure that our code or our product we're developing is okay. We would keep an eye on that all the time. Simplicity is essential. And like I said, with lean, that's also related to simplicity. We don't want to complicate things. We want things to be as simple as possible. And that's a really good principle, I think. Self-organizing teams. The team doesn't have a manager. In Scrum, you can have a Scrum Master who is a servant leader who looks out for the team, removes impediments to the team. For example, if, say, a VP is coming to the team and saying, I want you to do this extra work, the Scrum Master in a Scrum team would be the one to say, hey, they can't do that, right? They're working on this, and that would be part of the Scrum Master's job. But the team itself selects the work it's going to do and how it's going to do the work. And we regularly reflect on continuously improving. In a traditional project, you will see that too. You know, we're always thinking about how we could do something better, how we could change up our work. In Scrum, that's built in through a sprint retrospective. So there's an official meeting where the team can get together and reflect. Also in the daily stand-up meetings, we are looking at how to remove impediments. So those are the principles of Agile. So like I said, when we looked at the values, if you're thinking of, can my organization be Agile? Are we Agile already? You could consider these principles and say, well, do we do this? You know, does this fit with how we want to work? Maybe you do this in many ways. So, you know, there's a guideline. Benefits of Agile. Many organizations, as I'll show some statistics in a few minutes, have become Agile. So if you go to the internet, you'll find lots of information, maybe much more than you want, on Agile and on Scrum and on other methods related to Agile. Here are some of the benefits that organizations and their staff and their customers have seen from being Agile. Well, I mentioned that people are very important. You can see on here, it says happy stakeholder, fun, enjoyable. In a Scrum team, remember, teams are self-directed. Actually, in any organization that uses Agile, that applies. Stakeholders can be anybody involved with the project. It could be your customer, it could be the team, could be the Scrum Master. People are generally happier when they can define their own work, right? Customers are generally happier when they get something they value regularly. When the discussion on how changes are incorporated is simple, right? Organizations would be happy to see that there's higher revenue. This has been shown through studies because of the way Agile teams work. There is generally higher revenue to the organization. I think this is pretty evident why this would apply. You know, if we have to do less rework, if we have frequent check-ins with the customer, if we can define the backlog or the requirements and keep them prioritized and pay attention to that, then we should have a higher revenue from our projects. There's increased productivity. Generally, again, when people are self-directed, people are more productive. Time to market. Time to market, because of the iterations or sprints involved in Scrum, which is a method of implementing Agile, we can deliver the product iteratively and get something into our customers' hands on a regular basis. So time to market is generally cut down by a lot, which is a very good thing. Are there any questions on this? Okay. Okay, I will continue. No questions. Okay, thank you. Okay, so if you've been looking at Agile for your organization, you may have come across some of these terms: sprints, Kanban, XP, Scrum, backlog, retrospective. Agile is a mindset. So when we talked about the values and the principles, that is Agile according to the Agile Manifesto. And if you work in that way, you could say you're Agile. Now, sometimes, of course, it's helpful to have a method to go along with it. And Scrum is the most popular method or framework to implement Agile. With Scrum, you can have different terms such as sprints and retrospectives and backlogs. And of course, Agile delivers flexibility, which is a main benefit of being Agile. Maybe use a Kanban board. We're not going to talk about Kanban any more than this today, but a Kanban board, you can find software that supports that. It's basically a board you can have on your wall, or you can, share online of the work that you're going to do and the team is going to do, and have it prioritized. And you could have a to do, a doing, a done on your list of tasks, and you could have limits on how much work is being done in any of those areas. So it's another method you can use that is Agile. Let's look at Scrum. Like I said, Scrum is the main method or way that most organizations implement Agile. Here, under the pillars of Scrum, you see a link. If you're interested in Scrum, I'd say go there, find the Scrum guide. It's very short and it's very easy to read, and it'll give you a good basis for implementing Scrum. Very simple. The pillars of Scrum, Scrum also has values. So I might use the word values here, which are similar to pillars. These are the 3 pillars of Scrum: transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So just like with the Agile values and principles, if you're thinking of implementing Scrum, you want to think, the big picture as well as with the method. So transparency, you say, well, is this something that my organization, I would value? The people who put the Scrum guide together did value it, obviously. And I see it's very important to have transparency. So transparency is no secrets. We're out in the open. What we say is what we do. The work that we do and how we do it is visible. We don't hide things. We're very transparent. Inspection. So in Scrum, a pillar is inspection. And that is done regularly. Check-ins of how we're doing. Like I said, it's opposed to traditional project management where you could leave things to be inspected by the customer or even your own testing, whatever, for a little while longer. In Scrum, it's very important to regularly check in how we're doing. There are methods to do that. For example, there's a daily meeting, there's a review at the end of every sprint, and there's a retrospection at the end of a sprint, and there's planning review every sprint. When I say sprint, I mean iteration, and that's, like I said before, generally 1 to 4 weeks. The organization can choose the length of that themselves. Okay, another pillar of Scrum is adaptation. So we talked about Agile being adaptive. That's really what Agile is. So we can adapt what we're doing because we have shorter time periods, regular inspection, everything is transparent. Then we can be more adaptable. We're not basically long-term projects, we're short-term projects. Or you could think of it as really a rollout of a number of short-term iterations or projects, although they're all one. Now, this is all based on empiricism. Big word, means we work on the feedback. We work on what we observe. That's what empiricism is. If we can see something happening, for example, we have our daily check-in, we work together, then we're better able to work together and to achieve progress. So empiricism is observing and working on what we observe ourselves. If you've looked into Scrum before, you've seen a diagram similar to this. This is directly from Wikipedia. And it shows some of the, well, it shows the Scrum process basically. So I'll just go through that. So we start with a backlog, a product backlog. Typically, we would have a product owner who is responsible for the product backlog. The product owner is the one who gathers the requirements, basically from the customer, whoever wants the project. Other people can contribute to the backlog, and they keep this backlog prioritized, right? So most important items are first. And then the team, so there's a development team, and they, along with the product owner, look at the product backlog for each iteration, and they say, well, what work are we going to do this iteration, this 1 to 4 week period? And they create their own sprint backlog. So self-organized team, not told what to do by someone else, they determine it themselves. And then during the iteration, it says 2 to 4 weeks here, but it could be 1 to 4 weeks. There's daily meetings, a Scrum, which is a 15-minute stand-up meeting where each person goes through what they're doing and if there's any impediments. And then at the end of the iteration, there should be something that's shippable, something that's deliverable. And then we continue this process, so on and so on. So hopefully you can see through how the Scrum process works that it reflects the Agile values and principles and transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And there are Scrum values, which I haven't put in here because, there's only so much you're going to put in here. We have so much time. So this process is really not difficult. It's in the Scrum guide. You'll find what you need in there to put this into practice. And, you could start with a small, not your biggest project, maybe, but maybe a smaller project and see if you could do this. Typically, there's a product owner, a Scrum Master, and a development team, which is generally less than 10 people. It could be 2 or 3 people. It could be whatever. Okay, how does Agile overcome waterfall problems? When we talk waterfall here, that means traditional projects that aren't Agile, right? So as we saw in the previous diagram, projects are broken up into short intervals to deliver results quickly. You could do testing concurrently with development. And this is not just software. This can be applied, you could, to any area of work, any industry. And here we have the diagram. It shows the short sprints and the development and testing working together. Okay, I have a few slides here of statistics. And I've put the reference on here. In some of the references, they've done a lot of research on their statistics, so I'll leave that to you. Okay, so this is from 2020. It said 60% of companies experience growth in profits after adopting an Agile approach. That's a pretty high number, right? 80% of American federal IT projects adopted Agile. That's a very high number. The Agile failure rate is 8%, while Waterfall is 21%. Well, I'd say it's actually much higher than that, but I've taken the statistics from this page. And to say that we know that Waterfall or traditional projects can sometimes fail, which generally means they don't deliver what was wanted, what was asked for, on time, or within the budget supplied, right? With Agile, hopefully you can see how the process would reduce the likelihood of failure and increase the likelihood of success, right? More statistics on Agile and Scrum. There's the reference. 93% of business units had fully adopted an Agile model before the current pandemic did better than business units that hadn't. I think that's an astounding number, 93%, right? So those folks who had actually already been Agile, you could see, we all know we've been through this last year, how things can affect our businesses, and we need to be Agile, right? We all have been Agile, I'm sure, because we had to. Even though we may not have already looked at the manifesto and the pillars of Scrum, but those who had already thought about being Agile, they were ready. They had some things in place that helped them get through. 84% of those adopting Agile use Scrum. When asked what businesses want from Agile, the most frequent answer is speed. I would, in the KPMG Global Agile Survey of 2018, over 68% of organizations state faster product delivery as one of their key drivers for agility. Now, the people being interviewed here would probably be the CEOs, right? They want speed, they want delivery, right? The team wants to work well together. They also want to deliver well. They want to interact with the customer, they want to know the work that's to be done. So the processes implemented through Scrum can help with agility and product delivery. How popular is Agile? It's very popular. Okay, again, here I've taken two references, two different references. The big companies have, if they're not using Agile throughout their organization, they are using Agile somewhere in their organization because they have so many departments, that's how it is. Manufacturing, this number is lower. 27.4% of manufacturers rely purely on Agile. It's still a big number. So you can see goremotely.net. They've done some research on this. Now, this number here at the bottom, 97% of companies now use Agile development methods. Wow, that's an astounding number. And Beta News is an interesting reference. So you can see this is 2019. But if you think about your organization and you think about what we've discussed, I could say most likely you have used some Agile methods. Okay, this questionnaire is from PMI, the Project Management Institute, from a paper that is there. And I actually modified it. There were 7 questions. So if you go to this reference at the bottom of the page, it says 7 questions to ask. This is my spin on it. Very close, but a little different. And I thought if we have time, you guys could privately look at this questionnaire. And then if you're willing, we could discuss it without putting anybody on the spot. So here are the questions. 1, is your organization willing to, 1, dedicate a full-time business expert, a product owner, to this work? So the product owner is the one who would gather the requirements and keep them in order for the project. 2, dedicate a full-time delivery team. The importance of that is that the team should be full-time to the project, not switching back and forth between different projects, because that multitasking does reduce efficiency. So is there a project that the organization can give a full-time team to? 3, dedicate time to elicit just-in-time requirements. So that might sound funny, dedicating time to get just-in-time requirements, but really, that's what we want to do. We're getting the requirements when we need them, just in time, right? And there's some skill involved in that. Time box delivery cycles. Okay, time box means set a certain time to, put a limit of time to. So when we were talking about the iteration sprints, I said they were 1 to 4 weeks, right? Are we willing to do this? You know, you might think that's a kind of a silly question too. Are we willing to set a time box? It'll take a little discipline, not hard, but discipline. Support a collaborative environment. That could be a really big question. You know, when we're setting up our environment in an organization, are we willing to be collaborative? No? Are we ready to be not top down? Are we ready to talk with people and, you know, let them direct their own work? Apply the necessary discipline, which really relates to all the above. But, you know, if you're looking at the Scrum guide and you're saying, well, we want to do this, we got to do it. Yeah. Okay. So I've gone through those questions. I'm sure, hopefully you're thinking about them as we go through. Maybe you've got some questions about that. I have a little bit more advice on becoming agile with Scrum. So related to the other slide, but a little different. So the first thing, if you're going to do anything, of course, is think about it. Will it benefit my organization? So we've looked at some of the benefits here. You can find a lot more information online, of course, but I've given a highlight of some benefits. 2, discuss if the agile values of transparency, inspection, and adaptation fit or can fit with your organization. Is this something that you want to do? Is this how you work? Is this how you want to work? Maybe it isn't. 3, think about your customers, right? If you're doing a project, generally you have a customer, you're working with someone, you're delivering something. If you're going to work in a certain way, you want to make sure it works with them as well. And your vendors too, by the way, and your team, of course. But this question is about customers. 4, consider your people and infrastructure. Can we do it? You know, can we at this time spend the time to change our way of work or to update our way of work? Do we want to spend the time doing that? Engage your leaders. Hopefully everybody's a leader. If you have a large organization, you may have some people who have more influence than others. 6, launch a few small projects first. I have seen organizations say, yeah, we're going to be agile, we're going to use Scrum, but then they go dive into a big project, throw everybody on that, and it might take away from the organization. You know, you want to get used to it and learn the processes and you know, work out the kinks. So these ideas are also on this webpage reference here. Okay, I think there are some questions, Becky.
Sure is. Can you hear me, Brenda?
I sure can.
Okay. What are some common challenges organizations may face with the initial adoption of Agile and Scrum?
Sure. Maybe I'll just go back a slide here. Well, like I said, in some situations, people, you know, it's great to be enthusiastic, and you've got to be enthusiastic about what you're doing. But sometimes people dive in with everything all at once and you got that's good. However, think about it. Think about what you're doing. Is there something where I can learn on a project, where my team can learn on a project, right? So that's where launch a few small projects first is a good idea.
Right.
Okay.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were speaking, Brenda, was the daily Scrum meetings are great and effective, and you talked about face-to-face. How has COVID and doing virtual meetings impacted these Scrum meetings? I guess my question would be like, has it hurt productivity? Have people been agile to move to online and still get that productivity?
Well, this is what I think and feel and seen is that at the beginning, when people didn't know what was happening with the pandemic, say maybe last March, April, there was a lot of confusion in the environment. However, like one of the statistics showed, those who had already implemented some method of being agile and having daily stand-ups and all that, and you can do that online, of course, and you can use Kanban boards and all charts and all that online. People work online. They had a leg up, so they were already organized in the way to work together collaboratively, because working together collaboratively is very important, and if you don't have a method to do that already and you have to implement it and you're scrambling a little, you can get there easy enough. Well, I don't know about easy enough, but you can get there. And I think the ones that already had this set up did flow into it more easily.
Great, thank you. You kind of touched on this on number 4, but how can we manage someone who is resistant to change to a new model, who they've always done something a certain way? If it isn't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality. So how do you bring them along? How do you get them to buy into this new way of doing work?
Yeah, well, that ties in with the self-organized teams a lot. And yes, not everybody will agree with an approach, especially if it's this is how we're going to do it approach, top down. So education is a big part of Agile. And what I mean education, I don't mean, again, forcing it on people. I mean, that's why we do smaller projects as well, is have people who are keen to work in this way, be an example to the rest of the organization. It could just be a couple of people working together on one of the projects, right? And then, people would see and do see that this method of working works because people are happier from directing their work. And the people who are more reluctant to work in this way, either they'll see the value of it as time goes on, or they won't. Everybody doesn't. It's not for everybody. You can't force it to people, but it does work. And it's mostly in the empirical or the observation aspect for people, right? That they can see that it works. Even though there will be kinks along the way, it's much better to direct your own work, choose the work you want to do with your team, and so I'd say it can't be forced. It's a learning thing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Good advice. We have a question from Jerry. He said, hybrid agile is an option some organizations are choosing, but how do you reach a common understanding of what hybrid agile means when bringing together people from different organizations? So that's
a great question. Yeah. What does hybrid agile mean to you? Yeah, well, hybrid just means like a combination, maybe usually of of 2 or could be more items. So sometimes people or organizations will implement some aspects of, for example, Scrum, but not all. And they could call that a hybrid agile. You could have Kanban boards and, you know, some aspects of Scrum, and you could call it hybrid. I'm losing. Can you tell me the question again now?
Sure.
Please?
No, it's more about how do you reach a common understanding? So if different businesses are working together, how do you come to that common understanding of what agile means for each organization? So I think that means, how do you make companies work together with this new process?
Sure. Yeah.
And my not that I was asked the question, but I go back to the class that I took 2 months ago, and it's really about communication, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
So at the beginning, it's having like all the time that you spend planning before you actually start executing will pay you back in spades. That's how I'm reading that question.
Sure. Well,
right?
So looking at some of the agile values, right? It's interactions and individuals over processes and tools is the very first thing. So we know people, sorry, I got to do this side. We know people may have differences, you know, people, it's a communication thing, like I said, and it's a way we think of and work with each other thing, right? Collaboratively. And it's knowing that we may not agree on everything, but if we have the right of the mindset that we're going to do this, or this might be something we might want to do together, and providing an environment for that, then things, because people have to have their say. I mean, that's part of Agile, is that the teams are self-organized, we collaborate, we respond to change, you know, and when we took like at Scrum, we'd look at there's various values, including respect as a value. So I'd say it might take a little bit of time, but really the transparency, the openness, and the background behind it are the way to make things happen, and to understand that we may not all agree on everything all the time, because that's how we are as humans, you know. But
boring.
I don't mind disagreement.
It's healthy. I also learned that in the class. So I guess, let's see here. I've got a couple other questions around tools. And so you talked, I remember learning that this was developed, and you touched on it today too, about software. It was, you know, originally developed for software 20 years ago, and that manufacturing is at 27%. So what other types of organizations are best suited for using this, Brenda?
Any small or large organization can use these principles and methods. With a large organization, it can be more difficult sometimes, because you have all of the people and layers to deal with. However, a large organization, you know, would typically choose a group, a team, a project to say Scrum, you're using Scrum. They choose them as their pilot team. A small organization has a great benefit to being agile. Most small organizations, you know, are agile. You have to be agile, but you can focus more on the agility by looking at the Scrum process, looking at ways to maintain closeness with the customer, and to implement daily meetings of the team in a simple way, and to have timely reviews with the vendor, with the customer on what you're developing, and get feedback, and keep developing incrementally that way.
Mm-hmm. And this is related a bit. What tools are best used to support this transition? So is there software? Is it whiteboards? Is it sticky notes? What can help these businesses make the transition?
Sure. Well, any tool that you'll use is the first answer there.
Nice.
If a team, if a team is working on site together, they would often have a room or a wall, let's say a wall, where they'd post the charts that are visible to anybody who is walking by. So you could have, like, I think you showed me, Becky, a whiteboard, you know, some kind of chart on your wall, and you could do those things through tools as well. There are many different tools available. Some are free, some you pay for Agile and Scrum implementation. I just put together a list of that just by going through the internet, and also, you know, some of the experiences I've had with different tools. And some people use Microsoft Project or Excel just like you would in traditional project management, but there are definitely specific tools that have been created for Scrum in particular, and for Kanban. There's a lot of Kanban tools. You might see Monday.com, Jira, Atlassian is a big one for big organizations, and that costs a bit more money.
Yeah, I've heard Monday.com. We've been looking into that for us, and we didn't pull the trigger yet, but we've been researching it. So glad to hear you say that.
Yeah, sure. I'm not recommending it here. No. I'm just saying it's used. Yeah, you could find, there's lots of websites that will recommend, you know, the top 20 Agile or Scrum or tools to use. I've put together a list of them, but I wouldn't, it's not like a recommendation. It's just, sure, you know, comparisons that different organizations have done.
Great. I guess maybe just one or two more questions here, Brenda, as we close out the hour. Sure. Can Agile and traditional project management coexist?
Well, that's a great question. What do you think, Becky?
I think, yes. I think project management gives you the tools, and then, you know, you've got all, you know, there's 49 tools behind me on that board, but you picked the ones that apply to the project. And then for me, you make a visual and you use it with the team. So, and that's the Agile part of it. That's my personal thing, but the mindset of project management has changed the way I do projects and the way I think about work. Like, do we actually have enough time and resources to do this project?
Right.
And you know, that's a big thing for us, right? Because if you're a yes person, it's like, yeah, let's do it. Well, let's stop and think about the impact of this project, the people, the resources, and the time. Do we have the actual time to do this and do it well? Or are we going to do it half-assed, right? Excuse my language, but so I guess my next and final question for you, Brenda, would be, okay, so, you know, I've got my PMP, or people on here are thinking about doing your PMP. What's the next level of that to learn more about Agile and to stay current with the trends and tools?
Okay, sure. Well, PMI has an Agile certification, which I have and I teach. It is the PMI ACP, the Agile Certified Practitioner. So the ACP, it is helpful if you have your PMP, but it's not required. Lots of people get their ACP without the PMP. I can tell you about that, you know, individually if people are interested. You can go to PMI.org and read about the ACP. There's also Scrum Master and Product Owner certifications. I don't teach them, but I do give a course on Scrum. So that's my plug. But you know, the CSM, the Certified Scrum Master, is something you could look at as well, or a PSM. Agile Alliance is a website that you might be interested in, because they're the ones with the manifesto. Lots of information there, lots of educational resources. And scrum.org, of course, where the Scrum Guide is. And the Scrum Guide's quite simple. You know, you can sort of, like, it might be simple, but it might not be easy, or maybe it is. I don't know. You can think for yourself about that. Yeah.
Great. Okay, well, we've gotten through all of our questions, Brenda. We really appreciate your time today and everyone who came on and took part. We appreciate all your support. You're a great chamber member and you've always been involved with us. So we really appreciate that and giving up your morning with us. So thank you, Brenda. And tomorrow we're going to have the future of energy discussion. So road to renewables. We've got some targets. We're going to be talking about that. We're also on Friday, we're going to be talking about Aaron O'Toole, so the leader for the Conservatives. So our event calendar is full, as Kayla will tell you. We've got things going on every day, so don't miss out. And this webinar has been recorded, as you were aware when you came in. So it'll be on our YouTube channel. So if you guys want to go back and watch it again, feel free. And really hope everyone has a great day. Stay hydrated and wear sunscreen. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda.
Bye, Becky.